This is the Commonwealth, where we feature leaders of disruptive change. For this episode, we are re-airing a conversation I had last September with Amanda Valentine. Amanda Valentine is a fashion designer who has worked with musicians like Maroon 5 and 21 Pilots. She has appeared on Project Runway twice and got second place on season 13 of the show. I got connected with Amanda through Lincoln Calling, which is a music festival I help organize. She's one of the most down-to-earth people I've ever met, and shares with us the value of personal connections, pursuing your passion, and what it's like hanging with Adam Levine. Back in these days, we couldn't afford a nice camera, so the conversation is audio only. My apologies if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. When we recorded this conversation, I was splitting time living between my parents' house and on my friends' couches. I met a world-renowned fashion designer in the basement conference room of a hotel and had the following conversation. I hope you enjoy. Amanda, thanks for coming on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, at what age were you first interested in fashion?
I don't even know if I remember. I grew up watching my mom quilt and make our clothing. So, like, every fall before school would start, we'd go to the fabric store and we'd pick out our pattern and we'd pick out our fabric. And I don't know if I was maybe the last generation whose mother actually sewed. I don't know if that's like a Mormon thing or a Midwestern thing. I think
my mom sewed.
Okay. Yeah, now it's like nobody sews. But yeah, so she made our clothes, and I remember she would, when I was as young as like 2 and 3, she would give me old drapes or old sheets, and I would just put together these weird like toga outfits. And it's just what I always gravitated towards. And you know, she would set up her she would tie a quilt, which some people may know, where you set up like a giant frame and hand tie. Anyway, this is some real country stuff. And so I was just like fascinated with that whole process. And so it was just always what I was working on in my spare time. Yeah.
You're from Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah, born and raised.
Okay. So then did your mom teach you how to sew?
She did. She taught me, I think I probably got behind a machine when I was like 7 or 8. And she taught me for a while, and then she didn't want to teach me anymore. I don't know if I was difficult but by the time I was in junior high, I was taking after school sewing lessons. So that was like my after school project. I like quit dance, quit piano, and I would go to this Sheila Sievert's house, this wonderful woman who I think still lives around here. And she had like, I'm going to get this wrong, Sheila, don't be mad, like 5 or 6 kids, big Catholic family. And she had a little workshop set up in her living room, and we would take classes. And yeah, so it was just like, I'm one of those lucky and unlucky people that like always knew what they were going to do. Like, it wasn't even, there was never a big moment. It was just like, oh, this is just what I do. Like, now I just have to figure out how my life is going to fit around that. It's so funny. Like, yeah.
So did you come from a creative family?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're all kind of creative. My mom, obviously, like, amazing seamstress and design. Like, she's much better than I am.
Wow.
She's so good. And she's also an amazing painter and artist. And her mother was a lot of painters, and everybody in my family can draw except my dad, my poor dad. My dad is, I think his creativity is more like writing. Like, I wish he would write a book. He's more the kind of intellectual, but I know he's creative in his own way.
Okay.
In his own special way.
And then how many siblings do you have?
So I'm the youngest of 5.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a doctor, there's an actress, there's a musician, we kind of run the gamut. I don't know. Okay. We're a weird family. Yeah. We all just are individuals. Yeah.
Found your own way. I like it.
I had to. Yeah, like everything, by the time I was getting into anything, like everything had been done. You know, like we had the really good student, we had like, prom queen. So I was like, what am I going to do? Like, it's kind of weird being at the tail end of a family like that. Yeah.
You touched on your family being Mormon. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at age 14, you decided to leave the Mormon church. Mm-hmm. Walk me through that decision.
Well, it's kind of funny. I think it's probably pretty typical. I feel like a lot of people around that age make a decision. Obviously, I still lived with my parents at age 14, so I followed their rules. I went to church, but I don't know. I think with Mormonism, it feels a little bit more dramatic because it's such a culture. It's such a cultural religion that you are kind of leaving like a like a society a little bit. So I think it sounds more dramatic, than it really is. But I don't know. I just kind of didn't see it as part of my life. I don't know. It's tough. I really kind of still walk on eggshells about it because my family's still practicing, and it's hard to say, hey, I don't believe what you believe. I don't know, you know what I mean? It's so I still watch myself really carefully, which out of a weird respect thing.
Yeah,
It's interesting, but yeah, it's just not for me. It's not for me. I got really, it was discovering punk rock and feminism.
Okay.
Is really what happened, and I got real liberal real quick. I was like, oh, yeah. I'm my dad's. My dad and I were born on the same day. We're very similar. We butt heads like crazy, but we're polar opposites. He's older conservative man, and I'm younger liberal woman, and it's so funny because we're the same person in these totally different expressions of each other. It's so funny. It's like we're each other's lesson. Yeah.
Who was the punk artist that inspired this?
Well, it was the Riot Grrrl movement.
Okay,
so it was all the God, when did it start? I mean, it probably started with nice art. I think the first CD I bought was Bjork, and then it was oh, well, what's who's Bikini Kill, and who's and then this was the age of PJ Harvey, and I hated Courtney Love, but Hole and all that stuff was happening, and I was a 90s child, so it was so cool for me to see all these female artists that were more concerned with being cool than being pretty, and I was oh, I like that energy,
Yeah.
I was oh, I like that, and I'm a girly girl, but I don't know, I thought that was cool that it wasn't about looking a certain way. Yeah.
So you ended up going to school at the University of Nebraska.
Sure did.
Yes, majored in fashion design.
Yeah, what's funny is it's still in the College of Human and Family Sciences, so it's still a home ec degree. It's a Bachelor of Science. It's not a Bachelor of Arts. Yeah, it's clothing and textile design.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after leaving school, you decided to pursue a fashion career in LA.
Yes.
Why did
I didn't decide. I was just
You're going.
guessing. I was just fumbling through the forest. No, I mean, I genuinely have my brother to thank for that decision. I was graduating from school, had no idea what to do with my degree. I knew I didn't want to go to New York because that city would chew me up and spit me out, and I accept that. And I didn't want to play that game where you go and work for a big company, and then after 15 years, maybe you can be head designer. And I was just no.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something a little weirder. So my brother had just joined Maroon 5, and this is before anybody knew who they were. And they were working on their first music video, and he was like, why don't you come out and assist the stylist? And this was before fashion blogs and before people knew that movie stars don't dress themselves. I feel like people know what a stylist is now, or Rachel Zoe is a household name, and this I didn't know what a stylist did. I didn't know that was a job that you could dress people and get paid. Anyway, so I went out and assisted and worked on that music video and just loved. I love being on set. I love 12-hour days, grinding, everybody's, I don't know, I love the crazy energy of being on set. To this day, I love it. Yeah, fell in love with it.
So you went out to work on that first music video.
Yeah.
Where were you staying? How? Oh. Yeah.
I was sleeping on, at first, James and Adam.
James, your brother.
James, my brother, and Adam Levine.
Okay.
I feel like people know who Adam Levine is.
I've heard of him.
Yeah. They had this tiny apartment in West Hollywood, and when I first moved out there, I was sleeping on the couch. And it's the house that, it's so funny, it's the house that was on MTV Cribs, and it's just hilarious to me because I was like, oh, good thing I like hid my suitcase that day, or you know what I mean? Like,
were you in that? So I watched that,
No, I wasn't.
episode. Okay.
No.
Because there was a group of people sitting on the couch.
Yeah,
but it was
no,
a
I
quick-
wasn't.
Okay, yeah,
No,
it
that's
wasn't
with
you.
friends.
Okay.
I was not part of that. Yeah, but we eventually got a house together. So it was James, Adam, and I, and then actually Graham Nash's son, and then there was a studio in the basement, and like John Mayer would come and like jam in this. I mean, it was like such a weird, like early aughts Hollywood. I don't know. It's just so, I have so many funny stories about like one night I came home and Eve, like the singer Eve,
Yeah.
was like laying on my couch, and one, I was just like, what? One night I like came home, and you know that Lil Jon who does. I'm not gonna try and do what Lil Jon does.
Yeah, yes.
I'm not going to try and do it.
I'm not capable of
As a
doing it.
dorky blonde white woman,
Yes.
I think it's not cool
Yeah.
for me to be like, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like looking through my fridge. Apparently we were having a party, and he was just like looking through the fridge, and I was like, hey man, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I was just wearing some ratty like vintage sweatshirt, and he was like, oh, I really like your sweatshirt. And I was like, hey, I really like your gold teeth. And we ended up like having a 45-minute conversation about like the relationship he was in at the time. Like I had the craziest, like, it was just so weird. And I feel like being from Nebraska, like I feel like I don't know, Midwesterners kind of like aren't impressed by, or I don't know. I just feel like it was just always surreal. It wasn't ever like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. It was just like, that's so weird. I don't know.
Yeah, so Maroon 5 must have been blowing up then.
Yeah, they started.
After that first music video,
Yeah.
they must have just exploded.
Well, reality, it took a few years. They were still like traveling around in vans and opening up for John Mayer. They're good buddies, and he's really responsible for giving them like their first shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a weird time.
Yeah. As I was reading up before this meeting, it made me think of Entourage, the HBO series.
It really is. It's so, and here's the thing, like, that was just such a crazy time. And my brother and I have talked about this a lot, because that was just such a weird time for us, because we're really close, but like as I'm trying to figure out my career and like get started, and at this time I got like a full-time job working for this shoe company. And so I was working a 9 to 5. He was living his life a little differently. and I honestly, I was just kind of part of the entourage. I was like the den mother. I would like make sure I got groceries and make sure, I was kind of like taking care of the house at some point I realized like, I'm just part of an entourage, and I need to go figure it out on my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, I figured out I needed to leave LA. I'm just not a big city girl. I don't like it. I don't like being a small fish in a big pond. I don't like it. I'm used to, growing up in Lincoln, it's like I knew everyone. I knew everything that was going on. I knew every band that was playing every night. I knew every event. And I don't know, I just like that. I like that. And I visited Nashville a couple times, totally terrified of the South. I had no idea what the South was like. And I fell in love. It's just, it's about the size of Omaha probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just, I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond. I really would. I just got to admit it. I just would.
Owning it.
Yeah.
What type of work did you do when you moved to Nashville?
Well, when I first moved to Nashville, I co-owned a vintage shop.
What's a vintage shop?
Well, so I met a girl who had this tiny little shop above a record store, and she would go out, to all the like Goodwills and thrift stores and yard sales and get vintage dresses and shirts and sweaters and all this, and kind of fix them up, sometimes alter them, and then resell them. And I loved it. And so we went in together on a bigger space. And the real reason I did that is because I wanted a store where I could sell my designs. And so I thought, if I have my own store, they can't say no. And I can put as much in there as I want. Yeah. So that was my idea with that. just to get myself designing again. Because I mean, when I was in LA, I didn't really have a space. I was sewing like out of the garage, of the house.
So you opened your own vintage shop to sell your own clothing?
Yep.
How does designing work in this context? Do you design one specific piece and then that piece is unique that is on the rack? Or do you manufacture it? Or
this was me doing like one-offs.
Okay.
And a lot of times I would take something vintage and kind of like mix it with new fabric and do a kind of weird hybrid. Yeah, I was really just kind of experimenting and figuring it out, like what my thing was.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of times I would, like take a vintage shirt and kind of cut it up and add new fabric to it and make it a dress. And yeah, it was, I was just kind of playing around with like what my aesthetic was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So while you were in Nashville, Project Runway picked you up and you were on the 11th season.
Yeah.
How did you get first connected with Project Runway?
Well, what's cool is when I opened the shop and started carrying other local designers, I got to know this community of Nashville designers, and we started putting on fashion shows. And we'd have bands play, and we would like sell out venues and not make any money. We had no idea what we were doing. But so we started having these like giant punk rock fashion shows, and they were getting, we were getting write-ups locally. And anyway, so Project Runway contacted like a group of us Nashville designers, because the press, I think they probably were like Googled Nashville designers. So a bunch of us tried out, and it took me 3 times before I got on that first season.
And what's the tryout look like?
Oh, it's so you submit a bunch of work and a video, and then you go in person and show your clothes. They want to see how you are on camera. They want to see if you're like comfortable. And then, I mean, there's so many steps. And then you have a second day of on-camera interviews and a drug test, and you have to talk to a therapist, and you have to take like a psychological test, and it's so intense. You have to get a physical. It's crazy. Yeah, they just want to make sure you're not going to like totally lose your mind, I think.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did the first season you were on the show go?
Oh man, horrible. I hated it.
Huh.
It was horrible. I wasn't ready to be on camera. Like I never really thought I would do that, and I hadn't accepted. I don't know. I just couldn't get comfortable. And I think like I was so nervous about like, what if I say something and my grandma sees it and she's embarrassed, and I was like, I can't swear, even though I swear. Like I was really like censoring myself and like just trying to like, but when you block off, when you're trying to not do anything bad, sometimes you don't do anything good. It's like, if you don't let yourself feel bad emotions, you can't feel the good. Like, I was just so, like, closed off.
Yeah.
So I just was boring and got kicked off halfway through. And it was just a bummer of an experience.
And just for the people who may not watch the show, what's the structure of the competition?
So it's kind of like, it's like any of those reality shows. Like, I always say it's like Top Chef for fashion designers, because I feel like that's a big one. So it's just a bunch of fashion designers that get a challenge every week. And sometimes it's like you can only use certain materials to make a garment. Or, I don't know, it's always kind of different parameters. Sometimes they're super cheesy, and you can tell it's just like a sponsor wants to be a sponsor paid for this episode, so we're going to use, like, one time we went to, like, Red Robin and sketched while we ate French fries, and I was like, okay, guys.
Yeah.
It's like, y'all just needed some money. Cool. But, yeah, and then it's just, they watch. I love watching those kinds of shows, because I think the most interesting part is just watching people create and, like, all the different processes. And, you could have the same exact challenge and you have 12 completely different outcomes. And that's, I don't know. Yeah. I was a fan of the show forever. Okay. I loved watching it. Yeah.
So halfway through the season, I got kicked off.
Because I didn't know how to make tearaway pants for some male dancers. I'm not kidding. I was so mad. Wow. I was like, cool. I'll never make Stripper clothes again. I'm good. Oh, it was the worst.
How did being on reality television affect your personal life? Like, were people recognizing you on the streets?
Yeah. It still happens. I like it. It still happens at airports, and it happens all the time, which shocks me. I'm like, am I not old news yet? But it's super cool. And I love it when people say, like, I don't want to bug you. And I'm like, no, you're going to come up and tell me you like me. Like, like, that's awesome. Like, that's amazing. Yeah, I don't know. I had to get really comfortable with, like, my business, like, me being the face of my business, and which I never really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, I guess people want to know who makes their clothes, and so I had to get used to that.
Which leads to my next question of, after appearing on Project Runway, you launched your own clothing line called Amanda Valentine.
Yeah.
What went into launching that product line?
Man, it was a scramble, because after that show, I mean, millions of people watch it, and they come and find you. Mm-hmm. And so it's on a real learning curve with how to keep up with it. So what I did is, because I'm making it myself, I've done small batch manufacturing here and there, which I did a little bit of, but just to keep up with the demand, it's pretty impossible. Because as much publicity as you get, like, I still didn't have backing, so it's like, so you have to grow. I mean, all the growth I was doing was just funded on customer dollars, and that kind of growth it's really nice and natural, but it's like super increment. Like, it's just really tough you just need here's what I'm going to say. Most really successful fashion designers, and this is a sad fact, come from really wealthy families. Even like Zach Posen, he's funded by his family's trust fund. Tory Burch, I mean, like, all of the big ones come from crazy family money. And so that's just something I've accepted. And I also, didn't want to be owned by, my shareholders or what, like, it's just a really tough. So how I've kind of handled that is, I have my designs, but then I also have, like, screen printed t-shirts and just things that I don't have to have such a heavy hand in. And honestly, the TV audience, like, they don't want to buy $300 crazy dresses. Mm-hmm. They want a t-shirt. Yeah. And so I kind of had to learn who my audience was and what they wanted.
So were you preparing to launch this brand while you were filming the show? So, like,
Yeah, and I had already kind of had a little bit of a brand.
With your shop.
Yeah. So I was always kind of ready for it. I just wasn't ready for the demand.
Yeah. And then, so as you're prepping the demand, mm-hmm. do you make, are you making outfits and then mass producing them at however quantity you can with the resources you have, or like what?
No, I mean, mass. I mean, it's just me. And I think at my busiest point, I had 2 employees, and so it was one other girl and I, who I graduated with from the University of Nebraska. She lives in Nashville. It's awesome. I mean, it was the 2 of us making stuff. I mean, that's still what it is. And I think people don't realize that. But there are a couple small batch manufacturing companies in Nashville run by women, which is awesome, and that are my age. And so every once in a while I'll do a run of 20 or 30 through them. But it's as DIY, as it gets.
So, after you launched that clothing line, 2 seasons later, fans of Project Runway voted you back onto the show. Mm-hmm. What was your reaction when that happened?
I didn't know if I wanted to do it. I was actually kind of against it. And when the producers first called me, they're like, can we just put you on a list of 10 people and maybe you'll be one of the 3 that people vote on? And I was like, yeah, I'll be on the big list. And then it just kept happening. And I got voted back. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to have a miserable time this time. I'm going to relax. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to make what I want to make. And I really this time saw it as, I was like, oh yeah, this is a commercial. This is a commercial for me. So winning is important and all that, but I just have to make sure that every single challenge, people are like, oh yeah, I like that. Oh yeah, that's her vibe. I wanted it I just wanted to get my message across so that people were like, oh, that's her style, and I like it, and I'm going to go find her.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about, I was just trying to sell clothes, you know?
Why do you think the fans voted you back on?
Well, I'd like to say that they thought I didn't get a fair chance, and which I think in part that was it. But in reality, I was like tweeting about it, and Adam Levine retweeted it and was like, vote for Amanda. And I was like, oh, yep, pretty sure I just won. And honestly, let's be real. That's why I won. And because Adam Levine called out the Maroon 5 fans to vote. And honestly, and one of the other, Alexander, who was one of the other three, he like called me out. I mean, he talked a lot of smack about it. And I was like, dude, that's
name of the game.
Totally. I mean, you're right. He was like, well, if I had a famous brother. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm just trying to use whatever I got. Like,
some people have trust funds.
Some people have trust funds, and I have a famous brother, and I'm going to use it. Like, you just have to, like, I'm sorry, it's a hustle. There's no rules. Like, all's fair, man. So I accept his shade. He will hate me until the end of time, but, well, he's probably forgotten about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what did it.
It was helpful.
It was very helpful. Thanks, Adam.
And then how did you do on your second season?
Killed it. Yeah, it was so fun. I was like winning challenges, and I, spoiler alert, you should still go watch it. It's a really good season, actually. A ton of killer designers are on that. Season 13.
On Hulu, probably?
I think it's on Hulu. I think it is on Hulu.
Okay.
Yeah. I always just bought it on iTunes. Okay. I bought my own show. I just went.
Yeah.
I was like, can I get a DVD or something? I was like, really? Okay, I'm buying my own show. But I came in second. I was runner-up on that season. So, pretty good.
And then what happens when you're second place? Is it like a prize?
Nothing.
Good.
No, it's kind of, but second place is kind of the best. Because what's funny is the guy who won, he got like a year's supply of Mary Kay makeup. He just like sent it to my house. He was like, you get the makeup. He was just like giving me his presents. It was so funny. He gave me the stuff he didn't want, which is so sweet. We actually, the guy who won, Sean, is he from Australia or New Zealand? He's going to kill me. Oh my God. I'm blanking.
Australia and New Zealand are very close.
Oh, he's going to kill me for getting this wrong. Anyway, we were obviously really close, and we like went on vacation after the show wrapped together, and everybody thought we were like dating. I'm like, y'all, he is not interested in my type of woman. It's like, no. Yeah, it's the friendships you make is so cool. But coming in second place is kind of the best because people only like have good feelings toward, like, they're just like, oh, you should have won, but if you win, people are like, I don't know if you should have won. So second place is kind of like the beautiful spot to be in because they're like, oh man, I don't know, I don't mind.
How did the second place affect your clothing line?
You know, honestly, I thought about this. There's obviously a huge like push, but the first time was really like the biggest push, which sucks because the second time I was making such better clothing. But what's cool is I think I sent a clear message about my aesthetic, and so the second time around the stuff I was selling was a little bit more me. Like I was able to make my big crazy color block dresses, and like that stuff was selling more, which was exciting. It wasn't just a t-shirt business. So I felt like the audience was kind of understanding my vibe and like going on my crazy psychedelic ride with me. You know, they were like, oh, okay, yeah, I will wear this giant, bright, obnoxious dress. And that was kind of cool.
So you have both traveled and lived in multiple places around the world. I know on Project Runway you went to Italy, correct?
Yeah. So fun.
How has experiencing multiple different places affected your creativity?
Well, what's crazy is I think more than anything, it reminds me of my childhood. Like, my dad traveled for business. He worked for Chief Automotive Systems out of, I think, Grand Island, right? Grand Island? Yeah. And so he was VP of International Sales. So he would travel around to body shops and sell this equipment that was made in Grand Island. So he would come back from, like, South America and Europe and all these places and bring he would take pictures. He would bring like tapestries and fabric and little figurines and all this stuff. So I was always fascinated with, I don't know, with other cultures. And, you know, the Midwest, we've got our quilting and we've got our, you know, but like, I was kind of a little hungry for like, I don't know, I just thought everything outside of Nebraska was so exotic. You know what I mean? I was just like, what is this? And yeah, so traveling is just like me being a 6-year-old kid again, just like looking at pictures from South America going, oh my gosh, this is amazing, you know? Yeah.
What's your perspective on your hometown when you come back after seeing it, after globetrotting and chilling with John Mayer in LA? And
I don't know, it's always so surreal, honestly, because I just, like, my head can't catch up. I feel like I'm 10 again, or I feel like I'm even 18 again, or, you know, it's just such a... What's funny is I was in my hotel room this morning, and I was kind of taking a video of the landscape for my boyfriend just to, like, show him. You know, he grew up in, like, Detroit and Atlanta, and I'm like, no, let me show you. Let me show you where I grew up. And he was like, oh, I actually already did all this research on the state capitol yesterday. And then we started talking, and I was, like, sharing pictures of, like, the art of the state capitol. And I don't know, and he said something that just struck me. He's like, I just think the plains are just so beautiful. And I just thought, yeah, they really are. And honestly, just looking out on, like, I miss the big sky, and there's just something, I don't know, there's just something about the Midwest that I just can't really explain. It's just such a weird, like, tender feeling to come back, and I don't know, the nostalgia is deep, for sure.
When giving advice to a group of Nebraska fashion students, you said, understand that no one was born with your brain, your circumstances, or your influences. You have something to say that no one else on this planet can say. What advice do you have for someone looking to find that voice within them?
That takes some work, but that's the truest thing. I think the underlying message of that is also, like, don't compare yourself to other people. There's no point. When I went back on season 13 and I was like a little bit older than everybody, and I ain't old, and everybody had like blue hair and mohawks, and here I am with like my pretty blonde hair and my, like, you know, and I was just like looking around at all these like crazy, and I just kind of said, okay, cool. I'm not the youngest. I'm not the edgiest. I'm not even the best sewer. I'm not even the best designer. So what do I got? And I just thought, oh, I have this weird combination of my experiences, my influences, and that is all I got. That's my edge. And so, you know, my edge is watching my mom quilt and watching my dad travel the world. And if you think about those things and look at my work, like, it's so clear. So it's, nobody else could put those together and create what I create. So I think you really have to spend a lot of time being inspired. And, like, really give yourself the space to, like, put your headphones on and listen to music that, like, gives you butterflies in your stomach, and, like, just really pay attention to stuff that, like, stirs your chest. You know, that, like, feeling of, like, oh, what's this? Like, when that happens, like, stop. Be like, okay, why am I responding to this? What's happening? You just kind of have to take time with yourself.
Well, fantastic answer, and thank you for the time today, Amanda.
My pleasure.
The Commonwealth is edited by Kyle Kua, directed by Alec McChesney, and produced in partnership with KZUM Radio. Special thanks to Emmy Hernandez and Isabel Cheeseman for creative guidance. That is it for this week's episode. Thank you for being a member of the Commonwealth. If you enjoyed this conversation, please tap the share button and send it out to your friends and family. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. If you want to hear more conversations just like this one, go check out our podcast library. We've been making this show for about a year and have interviewed disruptive leaders from around the world. You can also tap subscribe or follow to stay updated when new episodes drop.